Hi, my name's David, and in this video series I'm going to be demonstrating writing a reasonably simple program starting from just the idea. This is aimed at people who are relatively new to programming, and I'm purposely aiming not to make a curated tutorial, but instead just to show a natural development process using the tools I would normally use, including finding the information, how I figure out what libraries and other things to use, and the iterative process of building up from nothing through prototypes and then cleaning up my code and making it maintainable. I'll basically be taking things a bit slower than usual, just to give a little bit more explanation about what I'm doing than I would if I were just working alone. But I will probably gloss over quite a lot of information. I'll try to provide links and other videos to in the notes for this video to show where to get more information about the tools and things I'm using. But a lot of that should be available just through general searching anyway. So I'll jump straight into it. The concept is basically just to take some API documentation and to pull some of that information out, such as this summary here, and present it on the command line. So if I had a command window, I could type something along the lines of Node to run a Node program. Or let's call it something, doc fetcher. This is what we'll eventually aim for. And then maybe math.min summary or something like that. And then have it so that when I run that, it'll pull out this summary information and show it on the command line. Eventually, I'd like to display it in a some kind of attractive way, showing headings and showing code separately and with syntax highlighting and things like that. But that's something that will build up as we go. So that's the basic concept. So I'll need something that can download that web page, extract some text from it, and then display it in some way. So I've already decided what technologies to use. So I'm going with Node.js. So that'll let me write in JavaScript. I've already installed it. And yeah, so that's kind of basic tech decision. I'm going to gloss over that completely. I'm also going to put this on Github so that the code is available to anyone. So if you're watching this video, you can clone the code using Git from GitHub, and that will give you a copy showing all of the steps as I go through. I'll cover a little bit of that as I go, but that's a big topic that I'm not going to cover in too much depth. So this is just the Windows app for GitHub. I don't normally develop on Windows, but my home computer has Windows and it's the best for recording screencasts. So that's what I'm going with. It means my tool setup here isn't quite as good as it is on my other computer, but that's not too big a deal. So let's call this API doc fetcher. So basically what I'm doing is making a source code repository. So this is somewhere that all of my code can be stored. So I'll just type a little description. Fetch parts of API documentation from the net and show it on the command line. So that'll create that for me under my David Mason account. So often I wouldn't create the repository first. A lot of the time I would start working and then create the repository afterwards. But in this case I wanted to that right from the beginning, just so that the code's available for demonstration purposes. So I can open that up. So that's what I've got so far, just a few. It's a gitignore file that's automatically been created. May have an option. Okay. Just going to open that with Sublime Text, which is my choice of text editor for working in Windows. It's good to have a good text editor. Just using Notepad's probably not going to give you a very good experience. Sublime Text is good, depending on the platform you're working on. Notepad++ on Windows, and then there are a range of them on Linux and on Mac. Now, what am I doing here? I'm just jumping into my folder that I just created, which is that one. Selecting that, so that's opened in Sublime Text. And so it's giving me a gitignore file with some ignore stuff for Eclipse and Visual Studio. Not really relevant, I'm not going to be using those. Is there anything here about Node? No, doesn't look like it. Anyway, I'll deal with that later. That'll be something I can deal with. So let's ignore those files. So first of all, I'm just going to create a basic index JavaScript file. So create a new file, index.js, and that'll be my main program, at least initially. The other thing I'll do is I'll open the Node.js command prompt, and let's zoom that in a bit so that others can see. So I'll just make the text a bit bigger, say 20. Maybe a little bigger. So I haven't got my Windows system that well set up for development. I would have found some way to let me just press Control+ or something to run that. So let's just change into that directory, which is in Documents. GitHub API doc fetcher. And now I should be able to run node index.js, and that should run my script, which at the moment has nothing in it. So first of all, I'll just make sure that that's working properly. I'll just log something to console. Hello there. Save that, rerun that, and that's working. So good, we have a basic working program. It doesn't do anything yet, but that's not too big a deal. Let's just tab into that one. So here is, let's start with this page as a basic example. So this is the page for math.min, one of the JavaScript core library functions that returns the smallest number if you give it a set of numbers, and some other things if you give it nothing or something that isn't a number. So I'm just going to grab that URL. I know I want to do something with it, and I'll just store it in a variable. I'll just wrap it in some quotes so that it's a string. So there we go. Now I've got that URL in my code, and I'm going to want to do a HTTP request to get that. So I might jump into Node.js documentation and probably want the HTTP module, and don't want the event request. So I've just done a Control F search, just because this was a bit big to manually look through. And here's request. So is this what I want? I already know that it is, but I'm just sort of showing if I didn't know, that's how I might go through. So basically, this is for making HTTP requests. It'll transparently issue a request. That one's always been a little confusing for me. Transparently is usually used to mean that I can make a request and I don't have to care about what's in the back end. It's sort of invisible to me because I don't need to see it. But I think I've sometimes heard it used to have the opposite meaning, meaning that you can see through to the core of how it works. But usually it's the former of those. Okay, so I can see here I can use http.request with options, and I can give it a callback function. It'll give me back what I want. So options can be an object or a string. If it's a string, then it'll treat it as a URL by the look of it. So, does it say anything about this callback? It's a one-time listener for the response event. And it returns a request class. So here's an example of usage. We've got something that's on data. So here's my function. This is the callback function here. There. So it's a function that takes res, which generally means response when you're talking about HTTP requests, and then it does some stuff with the responses. So let's do something like that. Get rid of that below there, and now we're going to do, just copy that. Except I'm just going to use URL instead of options. Request equals HTTP request with my URL and a callback function. Often when I'm writing inline functions, I'll write the full function construct, which is basically the keyword function, parentheses, and curly braces, and then I'll add the other parts. That way I sort of don't get confused about whether I've got enough curly braces and things in there. Okay, so let's see, they got the status code there. Yep, let's do that. Grab that status code. And oh, that's probably enough initially. Let's try that. Just run that. So here we go. It doesn't know what HTTP is. So in Node.js, I use common.js syntax to import modules. HTTP is a core module of Node.js, so I don't need to do any downloading of code. I can just include HTTP, and that should use it. So here we go. Something different going on, so that's good. And it's saying protocol not supported. So this is the error. Protocol HTTPS is not supported. So that's basically because of this HTTPS URL. I could try just using HTTP URL and run that again. That's interesting. There we go. So that's got another error, which is that the other end hung up. So maybe that's not the best URL. So I'll stick with HTTPS. And I'll have a quick look at how to handle HTTPS. Just see if it says anything about HTTPS here. Doesn't look related. But you may have noticed when I was clicking through to HTTP before, I'm just hitting the back button on my browser. Well, I'm not hitting the literal back button, I use the button on my mouse. Or control and left. So there's a HTTPS module there, which looks like what I would want. and I can use HTTP GET. So basically, again, this is sort of something that I have looked at before. Like http.get. http.get, which is basically a convenience method which is similar to http.request, but it automatically sets it to get and does request.end, which is actually something that I wasn't doing here. So that should have been get, which is probably why the remote end hung up and timed out, because I didn't do anything. So this is still using HTTP, but now I can see, yeah, it doesn't lag like that. But it's just doing the hang on, try it like that, like I had it before. This is just playing around. So yeah, I'm getting status 301 there, which basically means we want to redirect you to somewhere. Kill. Just pressing Control C to kill the process there because it was dragging on. So it's likely that redirect was saying you should go to this HTTPS URL, so we'd have the same problem. So in this case, I'm just using HTTPS. I'm going to use the same. Oh, I'm still calling that HTTP. So let's just make those both HTTPS instead. So in Sublime Text, you can select something and press Control D to select others, or you can select something and hold down Control and select something else. And then you get basically two cursors, so I can press Control and type on a few places at once, which is useful. It's good to kind of get an idea how to use the advanced features of your tools, but don't get too caught up in that, because first of all you want to learn how to write the code, and then once you've got a bit of mental capacity left, then go and learn how to write it faster. So where was I? I was basically writing a HTTPS get. There's a HTTPS get, and here's an example of it. So they're logging the status code, and they've got something. So they've added an error callback to the end. So this is attaching it to the this request returns a just jump into that. Client request, and so this is attaching a on error callback function to that request. I'll just have that do that in case something goes wrong. And I'll also just grab the data. So yep, let's do that. So that's writing to standard out. Let's just console.log to keep things consistent. So now if I run that, I'm expecting to get the data of the web page output, which is a whole bunch of buffer data. So why is that not showing up like a normal web page? So that's just printing buffer objects. Might just be that it's not treating them as strings. string. That looks better. Now we've got a bunch of stuff. That's a lot to read, but that looks like HTML from a web page, so that looks like what we want. So that's good. Now I want to see, am I just getting one data function or multiple? I'm probably getting multiple functions. So I might just get the length of that buffer that it returns. And say data length that. Cool, so we're getting 5 chunks of data there. Looks like most of them are roughly the same size, but not exactly. So we're going to have to sort of stitch those together in some way to get the page. So I'm just going to put them into a variable. So let's call this data, and we'll start it as just an empty string. And then here, I can still spit out the length of it, but let's append the data onto that. It should automatically convert it to a string because I'm appending it to a string. And then I need to get that out of there after it's finished. So what have we got? We've got our request. I'm not actually using this request, so I'm going to just not assign it to a variable. That shouldn't break anything, I think. Just running that again. Looks fine. Oh, get the length one there. And basically after this is finished, and I'm doing the wrong thing here on purpose, but basically I just want to output the data at the end, and you'll notice that that data will be empty because it runs straight through this callback, fires off the callbacks, runs this line, and then the callbacks start getting back after the after it's run that line. So what I want is an event after this response is finished. So I need some kind of event there, whatever it is, when that finishes all of its data. And then let's put another function in there, which I don't care what the argument is, so I just won't put anything in, and I'll have it log the data after that. So it's probably something like finish or end. Could look it up, or I can just play around. That doesn't seem to be calling it. That looks like it did it. I really should look it up just to show how it would do that. So I guess just Node.js HTTP response finished. Let's try searching in here. No, res dot data. And no, that's writing a response. Well, that's a half-hour timer, so I might take a quick break there just to break up videos, and then I'll pick up where I left off.